So great. Welcome, everyone. This is Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon to try and figure out the future for smarter buildings. In case you're wondering who we are, we're listed on mondaylive.org. And just to point out that views expressed here during this hour are personal, not of any company or organization. And please do make this interactive using the Zoom chat. It'd be great to do that. And if you want anything that's on this slide deck, it's available also on mondaylive.org. So this is the second week in October for us, and we are dedicating the month of October to understand system of systems and how it applies to our field. So looking forward to that. And today, last week we had a sort of, I think I'd say a sort of a general discussion of what system of systems is and how it sort of roughly fits. And we really want to dig in a little bit more on really the value of system of systems. And we want to do this using the sort of the paper that was recently released by the DTC and IIC, which is really about the value of system of system interoperability that can be gained out of system of systems. So looking forward to that. But before that, hand it over to Mr. Sinclair for an update from Automated Buildings.
Thanks, Anto. Yeah, we just got the system of systems from last week up. We of course you had some trouble getting it up as well, so we weren't able to write our summary, but it actually came out well. I was pleased with the summary of last Monday's sessions. Finally, we've got our AHR sessions up. We've got our agenda online there. Our theme is scaling up, and I think that's interesting because when we talked about the technology, what has really changed, and we've always had a problem where we've never had the sameness. Maybe that's not the right word, but we've always been, everyone's been a snowflake. And as we start to move into the system of systems, and then in addition to that, just into the cloud, the whole cloud native approach, all of a sudden scalability becomes very achievable and desirable. And then of course we're in a situation where we're very short of talent, and then we have this also greatly amplifies our ability to trowel this technology over. And we started back with the Monday Live, and we originally started with the silos as a problem, and I think they've almost turned into a resource now, is our ability to link silos together in the thinking of system of systems is an interesting play as well. So we kind of touch on all of those topics. Another thing that we're seeing that is having a big effect on the scaling is that we're now seeing folks, especially even just on our site, starting to cooperate and work with each other, and that allows them to scale. So if they're missing a piece of the puzzle and somebody does it better than them, then they just leap over to their site. And so if they're doing analytics better than they are, or they're doing AI better than they are, so we're starting to see rapid mixing of partners, and I think that's an interesting trend as well. We've basically have put out all of our articles that we've been writing on the system of systems. In September we had the evolution. I think that we came to the conclusion that system of systems is an important piece, and hence why we've taken it into our October theme. We have all those links there. They actually go back to LinkedIn rather than to Automated Buildings, so you can actually get involved in some of the discussions and also either provide your support or not. The Smart Building Show in London was a great success. The thing that impressed me about it was how supportive all of the exhibitors, speakers were of the show. They very much used social media to further their play and also help promote the show. And that's something we'll try to achieve with our speakers on AHR Orlando. They did a real good job of promoting that show, and everyone that seems to be extremely pleased that was there. So we're really pleased to be a media sponsor of that show. The other one that has come up is just an interest one, is the bottom line there. It says Google Summary Podcast feature of Notebook LM. It's pretty impressive. So this thing is something you can point at a document and push the button, and it actually creates a podcast. And we have a couple of examples if you click on that link, one on our site and one from Andy Frank as well. So it's kind of an interesting how that might be used and how that might change. I'm pleased that as these new mediums come out, the original design of our site is sort of allowing us to use ever what the flavor of the day is. And so that's kind of something I think is positive. Enough said, back to you, Anto.
Cool, thank you, Ken. I've been playing with Notebook LM as well, and it is very impressive, especially they don't actually call it a podcast, they just call it an audio review of it or overview of whatever it is you gave it, and it's very, very impressive. Just really looking forward to technology like that going forward. The other thing I was going to mention, you mentioned AHR. If you go to the free educational sessions, all of your stuff, Ken, is listed there now, right? Because
Correct.
it's all public. And so is the Smarter Summit, as well as the IBB workshop that we're doing on Wednesday. So all of that is up on there, but there'll be more info on both of those in coming weeks. So on my side, a couple of things. This being election season, I'm not going to talk about presidential election, but the organization called Building Action, which is a partner to us with C4SB, has produced this resource of where the candidates, congressional candidates, stand on building related issues by state. So if you click on this and click on a state, it will tell you what the candidates are saying, if they have something to say relevant to building. So interesting resource if you're into that kind of thing. The other thing I was going to mention is that a lot of what we're doing, especially with System of Systems, is really about graphs or networked graphs. There's actually a sort of a growing amount of literature online about graphs, and one of them is this site, which is very interesting. It's created by a guy, Tony Seal, I think is his name, and he's created this knowledge graph website. So interesting just to sort of explore that space and just to understand what graphing is all about and how that plays into a lot of the things that we're talking about. And it's all the same relevant stuff. So really good. The links here to various things, I will update the link here soon for Smarter Summit, but otherwise everything's the same. Any other news or thoughts to bring up before we move on? Nothing? Hearing nothing. Okay, so we're going to be talking about System of Systems. So we were going to start with the question that David posed right at the end of last week's Monday Live, which we didn't get an opportunity to respond to. However, I see that Rick is not yet online here with us, so he's the one that's going to respond to that. So maybe we wait for a bit for that, David, if you're okay.
Or I can respond on Rick's behalf.
Okay, go for it. Go for it then.
So,
And
I
while
think
you're
we're
doing that, I'm gonna bring Doug Migliori onto as a panelist while you're doing that. He's and I'll
that sounds
introduce him.
great. And
Go ahead.
okay, sorry, I'm in my car here. But I think the standout opportunity here is that there's no sense in being Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the mountain, as people interested in this area seem to do all the time, myself included. But the point is only to work on projects and with clients who already have an interest in this. And it's diminishing returns and wasted sales cycles and time to try to push this concept with an owner that isn't interested. And to Rick's point, we should focus our attention now on those who are interested in doing this, who are trying to solve the problem, and are interested to get to the other side of this and see what happens. And I think there are already a number of organizations in the industry who are leading the way. Quadrille is one, and Thano and his team have done great work there. And I think there are other examples, and I think it would be wise for this august group to track more of them. But the salient point is, as we begin this work or align these efforts with organizations that are already trying to do this, the most valuable thing we can do for those interested organizations and ourselves is to diligently track all of the data for everything we do. Because if we go to commercial owners who are investors, they won't care about the hypotheticals or the theoreticals. They'll want to see positive proof of success elsewhere, and they'll never take a chance doing it first themselves, typically. So the more we can gather data, gather value stories, and have real proof, in essence, multiple different case studies of the value of this approach, then we'll be best equipped to approach the real estate owners who are purely in it from the revenue and investment side of things, and not the owner occupants who have a self-interest to accomplishing all of this. How does that sound, Anto? Was that a good?
Yeah, I think that was a good. The slide that Rick sent to me, or the image that he wanted me to bring up here, is this. And this is just this is data from the EIA, from DOE EIA. No, it's basically that. Number of buildings by number of buildings, and this is by square foot. And I think what the distribution of types of buildings is really what he wanted to point out, that it's not, and this doesn't quite map to those that don't want this information and those that do. I'm not sure it does, but it's just that not all of these buildings are the same, is the point.
Oh, well, and I think when you look at all of these different types, I mean, typically in commercial real estate, it's divided into four main sections: office, residential, multifamily, retail, and industrial. And when you look at all of those commercial asset types, that's where these investors focus their energy. I think where we have, I mean, here, I think education is a great area to focus on. And also with large global enterprise organizations like an Amazon or a Microsoft, who have clearly stated goals, or Google clearly stated goals for achieving a net zero footprint and things like that. And it's those owner occupants and the universities where I think there's the best chance of success and most interest.
Anybody else want to chime in on this aspect before we move on? Okay, hearing none, let us move on. So Doug, I see that you've joined us here as a panelist. Welcome. Doug Migliori is one of the authors of this paper. Are you there, Doug?
Yeah, hi, Anto. Good to be here.
Hi. You have camera?
Sure.
There you go. Yeah, and one thing, you and I spoke, Doug, a few days ago, and we were talking about having you come and join us here. And the thing that you pointed out is the title of this paper, which actually speaks exactly to what we've been talking about. And I'm wondering if you can sort of elaborate on how that title got to where it is, and then maybe we can talk around that in the context of buildings.
Sure. If you look back to how this work was initiated jointly by the Industrial IoT Consortium and the Digital Twin Consortium, it was, the charter was about interoperability, how to solve interoperability in a way that worked for both digital twin systems and IoT type systems, basically the digital and the cyber physical systems. How you would approach interoperability in a way that would scale and add true value. That was the charter. And so as we got into this, and by the way, this was a 2-year effort to get to the culmination of the paper being released in the last few weeks. So over the course of 2 years, we first looked at interoperability in terms of what was a key concept for interoperability that would apply cross-domain, cross-use case. And there are interoperability models that focus on a concept of asset interoperability or product interop. But if we looked at a concept that would have the broadest applicability, we focused on the concept of a system, where you could look at really any type of activity or physical or digital type of entity as a type of system based upon its well-known definition. So we started there, and then from there you looked at what the U.S. Department of Defense military had started to utilize probably a quarter century ago to address the complexity of multiple integrated systems in meeting a particular a goal, maybe a mission critical goal. And they evolved the system of systems concept from that. And a key part of that is addressing complexity, number one. The other part is that those systems are all independent systems. They were not built together to form a broader system that incorporated all those constituent systems. They were each built to serve one purpose, independent of anything else. And so they looked at how to get all of those independent systems to work effectively together to reach a greater purpose, a greater goal. So that's really was the premise. And we started to break down the characteristics of the system of systems approach into what you see there, the 6 C's. And I think from last week's discussion, interoperability was obviously a key distinction. You know, it's a versus integration. Interoperability is distinct from integrated systems. The other key part, though, is that you could have multiple approaches to interoperability. But when you start to look at composability and interoperability together, where you want to be agile and compose a system, a collection of systems together dynamically to solve a problem that may just be something that came up as a challenge to solve, and then the problem goes away and you can disconnect those systems. So the ability to compose interoperable systems led us to, again, support the system of systems approach and how it addresses things. So to be composable, you then start to look at what are you trying to compose? Well, you're trying to compose not just systems, but their capabilities. And so that's where capabilities became another key concept in this. And then, so that's where we get from systems into models for interoperability, because you can't be interoperable unless everything is working off a common model. And then on the value creation side, we really started to look at, again, this is, the value is different in different domains, but there is a lot of value in creating a virtual representation of assets and sub-assets, and where each of those virtual representations that lives separately from the physical implementation can start to connect together virtually in the cloud to go through and do what if analysis and get to the point where you are supporting intelligent decisions. So it all starts to come back to decision intelligence by being able to connect a lot of virtual systems together that each represent the current state and information and knowledge of its particular representation, but you are able to make better decisions based upon that holistic knowledge, that could go back as simple as, if you're connecting a weather monitoring system to an irrigation system, you don't want to be running the sprinklers when it's raining. And it gets to be just that simple. But you can extend that value and that benefit across a lot more complexity. So I'll stop there.
So, I mean, I don't know whether we should jump in directly into, addressing what David was saying, that some people just look at the building just as a number, just as a piece of financial asset, that they don't care about what it actually does. I mean, I don't know how you would tackle making the argument that system of systems can actually help with that.
Well, I think one way it could help is if we could get some examples, the people who want and support the idea of systems, once they have successful implementations, then I think they can be used to people who are just looking at the numbers. And if the numbers prove to be positive, then I think they would be interested. So I think it would carry some value that way.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of great examples in our space of buildings of how system of systems has actually ever been accomplished, let alone what has it accomplished. Because the technology to be able to bring the systems together has been frustratingly complicated or very expensive. And so the examples that we've got of, these amazing buildings that are all connected and all the data is flowing, helping make it, those are not scalable or repeatable. So the evidence of success is kind of not applicable to the rest of the domain. Examples from other domains is probably where we have to look for the system of systems effect.
So David was talking about a number of building owners that get it, that understand the value and are actually doing good stuff. Are we saying, Rick, that those are not necessarily system of systems because it doesn't have the composability that Doug was saying?
I'd say that bringing anything together, even if you're bringing things together and you're looking at two screens next to each other and trying to make the most, logical best decision using not composable, but nearly composable, that's probably
physically composable by bringing two screens together. Yeah.
That's probably the best evidence of what the possible benefits will be. And I think that that's why some of these organizations who are starting to demand, like the one we were just on the conference call with, they're starting to demand that this be made more possible because they can start to see what the benefits will be. they can imagine. In fact, they can write it down on paper and say, we think we're 30% out of whack in terms of our total cost of ownership. And you all have heard me talk about the fact that, okay, so commercial buildings represent only 17% of the nation's total square feet. It's also there's the slide. So of 96 billion square feet, offices make up 17%. Sure, some of the other commercial square feet could be considered commercial, but the amount of square feet that is offices, for instance, we spend a lot of time talking about, but it's the lowest total cost of ownership of everything except for warehouse and storage. And apparently an awful lot of the owners of that square footage, they only care about how much money they're going to make when they sell the building. Now, that's not
Rick,
what
sorry to cut across, but I think those are incorrect assumptions. Retail is a huge market segment that's mainly commercially owned. There's a whole lot of multifamily all over the country that is commercially owned and institutionally owned. And there's the majority of industrial is commercially owned. And they do not just make their money when they sell. They look at that income stream, especially for REITs. They look at that annual income stream as an important avenue to their investment strategy.
Right. So the productivity of the factory, the productivity of the square foot of the retail and everything is really what they look at, not the value of the building. So
it's everything. And I wouldn't use the term they wouldn't use the term productivity. They would use the return. They care most about vacancy and keeping the building as occupied with leasers as possible. And they care about their rental rates being as high as possible in their submarket in order to, at the same time, achieve the highest occupancy and the lowest vacancy. What they care about is as high occupancy and as low vacancy as possible. Because even if you have an office building that's typically less than 10 or 15% vacancy rate, or more than 10 to 15% vacancy rate, they're no longer making money on the building. So it is all about the vacancy and utilization and revenue and income.
Anybody else want to chime in on this?
I can also, let me add one more thing, is that there are tons of real estate investment funds. And funds have a 5-year hold time, 7-year hold time. They'll go and they have an investment thesis where there's a type of asset they're focusing on, let's say Class B office in downtown areas where they're going to do an uplift to get it as close to A as possible for the lowest money, and then lease the whole building out. And there are lots of opportunities in that scenario where system of systems could really help in lowering operations costs, lowering property management costs, and improving the tenant experience, and therefore the return on investment. So I'm not saying this is where we should focus, but it's absolutely this is how they would be looking at this.
Yeah.
And Rick, I get it that office is only 17%, and the office market in general is a poop show and not a good use of an investment of time. I think where it's the best investment of time are universities, and they also, like Cornell, has a ton of data from integrating systems over the last 20 years. And their main focus was, of course, energy savings, but with that data, they already have a ton of stories about and anecdotes about what they've discovered by taking an integrated system of systems approach.
Okay, I'm ready to throw my 2 cents in.
Here comes Steve.
So, we've been searching for the way to identify the value and present the value to the C-suite. And which is, makes, obviously makes sense. The point I want to make now is that what's changing for sure, and it's not a trend that's going to slow down, which is that all of these siloed systems are migrating their technology to include cloud in one fashion or another. Okay? So in the past, we talked about integrating systems within a building. And, 20, 30 years ago. And a lot has been done to achieve that because of all the different field buses and proprietary and open and all that, right? Well, with everything moving to the cloud, whether you want to do it or care about it, it's almost irrelevant. In order to operate buildings in the future, you need to be able to bounce from cloud to cloud to cloud. Okay, how can I do that in a practical way? Well, the answer is the systems have to be interoperable. And to a large extent, they're not, right? So our whole emphasis on systems of systems is a way of explaining that there's a way to get there to make them interoperable. And I'm less concerned about trying to make them valuable to the owner from a long-term perspective of what it does for the value of the building and whether they're going to further reduce the energy savings. I'm just talking about getting the day-to-day job done of running a building, just focusing on the operations. I've got to continue to run the building. In the past, I could do that, putting up a control center in my building, connecting a bunch of monitors and everything is right there in one control center. Well, now in this new world, I've got all my staff, both internal and external, wanting to do things from a laptop somewhere, meaning they're going to be connecting over clouds of one sort or another. And so I'm suggesting we just focus on the problem of interoperability as the problem we're here to solve. And it's going to make it possible as we move into this new future to have these systems work in a manner that makes everybody be able to do their job, and less concerned about yes, there will be residual value in terms of reducing energy and hitting their carbon footprints and all this other stuff. But I'm just talking about solving the problem of having clouds interoperate in a well-defined, affordable manner. That's the problem we're solving, because that's the future. What do you guys think?
I'll jump in. And I guess, Steve, to some degree, I definitely agree with you with respect to cloud. And as I see it, the cloud aspect of this is just part of the enabling of how we deliver system of systems. And I think, as I've been thinking about this since our last call, is talking about the value. All right. And what is value? Value's in the eyes of the beholder, as I see it. Steve, you may have a perception of what value is. I might be a little different. There'll be some commonalities or whatever. So as I see this system of systems is value, and our challenge is we can talk about value every day till we're blue in the face, which we do. But we're not, as I see it, the challenge for us is to truly demonstrate and actually give use cases of that value. So for example, these value points is what I've thought about. So enhanced capabilities. Where does system of systems provide enhanced capabilities to me as an owner, to me as a system integrator?
Where does, how about value as far as resource optimization? How? We say it, oh, you'll optimize. How, where will this, how is this being delivered? Prove it. Improve decision making. We talk about data. Everybody talks about data today, all right? But again, how does that data improve my decision making as an owner or an operator? How about reliability and resiliency in a building? That is my concern in talking to owners and operators. That is now moved up the food chain in the C-suite, is reliability and resiliencies of their buildings. Because if their buildings go down, they cannot operate their business. If they can't operate their business, they can't generate income. Cross-domain innovation. How does this bring all of this together? Again, that's sort of that interoperability play. And does System of Systems provide a strategic advantage to me as an owner or an integrator? If so, what are they? As an owner, yeah, I can get higher rent. David, to your point, I think that was sort of where you were going there a little bit there. And I can get more tenants. I can reduce tenant turnover, so forth and so on. So to me, the challenge is we've got value points, but we're not proving it. With that,
So maybe Doug, maybe you can pick this up and, you know, looking at it from a systems perspective, how would you respond to these 2 points?
And they're all very valid points, and they're all characteristics of the value creation. I just think the if you were to pick one way to describe the value, in my mind, it's all about, it comes back to optimization, but to be able to optimize, you have to have holistic knowledge. And so it comes down to decision intelligence. What you can gain from a system of systems, which you can compose dynamically from available systems that are out there, not just this buildings or the systems within a building, but systems external to a building that would provide insights that are valuable to make those decisions. That's where I think you want to be able to connect to those service offerings, and I'll call them services because that was another concept of the interoperability model, is where each of these systems has capabilities that are exposed as services that you can monetize. And I think David mentioned last week that, you know, what's the incentive for doing a lot of this? Well, you have to create an ecosystem that enables monetization and incentivizes sharing of information. Otherwise, it's not going to go anywhere. So I think all of those are valid. I think I think those that are interested in see the value of a digital twin will see the value of a system of systems approach to implementing digital twins. So anywhere where there are buildings on a campus, whether it be a university campus, it'd be buildings within an airport, it'd be buildings that are owned by a county. Like I've worked with the Orange County Public Works that owns 300 buildings in their county. They can see the value of digital twins and how those digital twins of each of those buildings can create greater insights by being connected in an interoperable way based upon this approach.
So Doug, Mark went off in a different direction from what I was trying to see if there's some agreement on, which is System of Systems has all these different characteristics in the table that's been shown, right? And I'm just suggesting, might it be valuable just to focus on what I think is the most important, which is interoperability, and driving our industry to define what characteristics need to be present in any system that a building owner purchases that makes it inherently interoperable. And that becomes the focus, because we know it's
That's the focus.
Right, so if we
And-
do
but
that,
it's about,
then all these
what,
other things get enabled automatically.
sorry, I stepped on you there.
Yeah.
Interoperability is the number one focus. It's the largest value inhibitor. I mean, there's been studies done by McKinsey that showed 40% of the value of IoT is tied to interoperability.
Right.
It is preventing so many things. We have all of this great technology, but we haven't taken time to establish the governance to allow it to all work most effectively together.
Okay.
And there's resistance,
Mhm.
there's a lot that make money monetize the status quo where,
Right. It's the
system
silo
integrators
effect.
can.
It's the inherent
so
silo effect. It always shows,
it's a
always pops
simple
up, right?
problem.
Yeah.
It's really a simple problem to solve if
Right.
you actually could demonstrate that everybody's better off and it can make more money that way. And that's where it almost, you can do, again, as a county or as an airport, that are anything that's considered kind of like a micro city and it has an ecosystem of stakeholders, you can see the value and establish your own governance to make that happen. But beyond that, you really need to have first an industry consortium to start to create this momentum through a standard that they're proposing. But it's almost cross industry is where you need to be in order to solve complex global challenges like sustainability. That is not something that a single building owner can achieve, in context of what really needs to be achieved with everything connecting together in a way that shares information and makes the most efficient, optimized decisions.
Tracy? You're unmuted.
Uh, yeah, I didn't have anything specific to say. It's interesting to hear the different perspectives here a little bit. I think last week I brought up the interoperability as sort of the key to unlocking this. And having listened to all of this, I stand on that still. And I was thinking as we were kind of arguing the different points of view, depending on the type of real estate, type of owner, so forth. It comes back to something that we've wrestled with quite often over the years, which is the owners don't care about a lot of that other stuff and where we are in terms of the table that we started out this discussion with. What they care about is unlocking that data, having access to it, being able to monetize, to use it for whatever it might be. And the challenge we have is an industry who is motivated, as Doug mentioned, to not necessarily make things interoperable, to monetize off their competitive advantage within their silo. And we have customers on the other side who are starting to get it. A few are getting that. We mentioned at the very beginning, we need to focus on that percentage, if it's 10% or 17 or 27, who understand the need for this, and to open that up. And I think the steps that we're taking in terms of creating some of those standards and methodologies to get there, we can't get there fast enough. We need to accelerate what we're doing in order to sort of start the momentum going. I think once we get momentum going in the industry, we have real life examples. This is going to get easier and easier as we go forward.
This is Keith.
I
I had a quick comment. I was reading yesterday on LinkedIn. I think they were talking about it was the anniversary of the UPC, Uniform Product Code, the barcode that we see. That thing is scanned billions of times a day. And how it started was they didn't agree on a standard for interoperability or standardized UPC, product coding. IBM just pushed it out with a product. They just had a quick ad hoc, engineering meeting and, let's make up 10 digits and turn it into a barcode. It's like a elongated Morse code symbol terminology. and they just did it. So I think when you couple solutions and value together with a perhaps proprietary standard, you end up becoming a de facto standard. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve, is to get into that position of being de facto standards that are actually utilized and to provide real value in the real world.
I agree with that, but the thing I would also add is if you start with David Wiltz's example of Cornell University, as we all know, Cornell was an early proponent of BACnet. One of the reasons they're able to extract this value is the interoperability we've been working on as an industry for 30 years. So unlike some other industries, we're well along. The problem is that we're well along in certain silos, and that interoperability doesn't cross into other silos. But I'm very strongly in Mark's corner on starting and using a top-down approach to identify what the value propositions are for owners that are achievable through this kind of interoperability, cloud-based or otherwise, digital twin or otherwise, and use that as a starting point to motivate the argument. And I think that, you know, we've mentioned several things before, such as risk and insurance, reliability, energy, comfort. We've gone through all these things many times, but I think it might behoove us to create a table of these value propositions and potentially look at half a dozen or a dozen value propositions across the industry that could be attained by looking at this information to spark people's imagination as to what can actually be done.
But
I
wouldn't
like
it be
that.
easier? Wouldn't it be easier to seek out and find owners that are already doing that and are already asking that, maybe in clumsy words, because they're looking at it differently?
I'd be happy to participate in that exercise with everyone.
And they're not either or, I think. It's something that you can do both of, right? I keep coming back, kind of thinking about what Keith was saying about the UPC code too. And as we're moving forward on this, the old Voltaire quote, you know, perfect is the enemy of good.
Good, right.
Right? We need to just get something launched out there and let the market figure it out from there. And this is, if there were ever a case for an MVP version, this would be it, right? Let's get something minimally viable out there and let the market start to drive what needs to happen.
I think you're right, Tracy, because when you look at the IBM graphic there, it's kind of trying to boil the ocean. If you have a look, it's covering everything. And Ken was talking about examples. Well, I don't think there's any other examples in any industry where it's trying to do that sort of scale. And it probably needs a lot more focus of what does get affected by systems. Literally what Mark was talking about was, if an industrial system goes down, then you stop manufacturing, you're not earning any money. If a data center goes down because the temperature wasn't right, and it's combining all those things, everything collapses around it. I think with the systems we're used to have more latency, it takes much longer for people to be affected. And I think that's where really this interoperability thing comes in, is that you manage it down to the systems that are urgent in terms of what is needed in a building, you probably get more traction.
We're starting to see movement again in the industry that we play in, which most of you know is sort of that small, medium-sized building, specifically a lot of restaurants, right? Quick serve restaurants in that space.
Yeah.
Where, it's one thing to get the buildings communicating, which we've been doing for quite a while, but now we're starting to see movement again in the industry where they want not just the buildings, but all of the kitchen equipment and so on and so forth as part of what they have access to. part of what's providing data so that they can make decisions about where to prioritize capital, for instance. Do I get a new grill or do I get a new RTU?
Yeah.
Those are real decisions that have to be made, right? That's an industry with single digit net profit margins. So,
And as an example to that, Tracy, I remember you saying on one of our Monday Live discussions, and I agree with you, what you said is that for that particular industry is what they understand is not so much a new RTU or making all the building systems interoperate together. But what they understand is it going to make me sell more meals? Is it going to lower my food costs? Is it going to in other words, they are equating the business side to it. And I think that's, to me, that is where it is, especially for that industry. Case in point, I was meeting a couple of weeks ago with a major fast food operator, lots of them globally. And when we talked about OT, they told us, I know my HVAC system is off kilter. I know my lighting does not go on and off like it should. I know. Guess what? I want to know how long the customer stood in line before we serve them. Was the meal we prepared built 2 hours beforehand, or was it built to order? In other words, echoing exactly what you're saying. So is an approach for us as industry to talk about the business side of this versus first, and then the technology side of this second.
yeah, I think it comes back to the case study, the value study
Right.
that Jim brought up, right? And it's going to be different, especially those built for purpose buildings that, you have to look at that business model differently. A lab that Jim has his system in is going to find value in different kinds of things than a restaurant where our system is, or school, or a multifamily, or a commercial building. So that's been the challenge in our industry, is there's no two things alike. There are no two buildings exactly alike. And buildings are used for so many different purposes with different business models behind them. We just have to kind of adapt and tick those off, I think.
So really what we're saying is value that gets created by multiple systems somehow interacting with each other, right?
It is,
wondering,
undoubtedly,
Doug,
sorry, Anto.
I was gonna ask Doug, because you've been doing some interesting projects related to airport. I know they're pilots, but there's that element to it in the stuff that you've told me about in airports, trying to understand where the movement of people and trying to understand how that movement of people can be steered towards maximizing whatever it is you're trying to do. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, so the dynamic aspect of a system of system where independent systems can come together, connect on their own, share information, and provide situational awareness to make the right decisions, react real time, quickly to changing environments. And in an airport, there's always changes. You don't have just a fixed way of doing things. There's always something that is affecting the flow of the passengers, the baggage, the airplanes, the workers, and they're all moving hopefully in harmony to just get most efficiently a person on a plane and on their way without missing their flight, and in as stress-free of a situation as possible. So the system of systems approach to being able to manage that complexity is highly valuable. We applied it as a POC to really with the, airports, again, starting with the top level of a system, what are the goals at the top level, and for any business, including an airport operator, profitability is number one, which includes, increasing revenue, reducing costs. But then customer experience plays a big part into recurring revenue. And so we focused on how improving passenger experiences can actually result in additional retail revenue. When you're less stressed, you're more willing to spend money. And so we applied that system of systems concept in managing that flow across the airport, where every entity was really represented as a digital twin with goals. Airport as a digital twin with goals, connecting to another digital twin, which would be a passenger with goals. So you could extend, so we approached it from connecting all of these digital twins that represented each of these entities within the airport to understand how to optimize everything and respect each other's goals, the goals of all the stakeholders.
Including each individual person as a system.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
So
Now, this may be extreme in compared to the restaurants you deal with, Tracy, but there's commonality, right, in terms of the structure. Sorry,
Yeah,
Steve.
and first I want to say, I was just thinking, I can't think of a more dynamic, moving environment than an airport.
right.
Everything about it is in motion, right? Another parallel, Mark will appreciate this given his background, that comes to mind, and it was use of technology that changed the way this was done, and that's marketing. Marketing used to be all about lists and list management and big, kind of shotgun marketing, mailings and so forth. And even that moved into emailing, but the same general approach. But somebody figured out, hey, I can use technology. And out of my 100,000 person list, I can find the 1,000 people who meet this specific criteria exactly and give them a personalized experience, right? That's where marketing is today. It's that very personalized, find the 20, 30, 50 right decision makers, not blast out something to 50,000 people. Buildings are the same way. A lot of the general principles apply across all building types and so forth, but we can use technology to personalize that interoperability, those system of system approach to give the experience needed for that particular industry and building type, right? What I need for restaurants is different than what Doug needs for airports, or Jim needs for labs and so forth, right? And I think that's where we're at. And we just have to recognize that and go after the segments who are ready to move forward with this, like we started the conversation.
Yeah, Tracy, that's a great point. I think sometimes we raise the bar so darn high in this industry. I mean, data quality is a great example. We achieve millions of dollars of savings across thousands of RTUs, optimizing maybe 50% of the portfolio. That would sound like a fail to an IT data person, but in the customer side, we're still bringing value by focusing, to Tracy's point, on what matters most. So
you got to think baseball, not golf, right? Batting average of 300 gets you into the Hall of Fame.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, I mean, anything like full self-driving is another technology that's driven by AI. It doesn't need to have zero accidents to be adopted. It just needs to be 10 to 20% better than errant human beings to be effective and valuable. So we got to stop raising the bar to unreasonable limits.
Yeah, guys, just to tie the two sides together, what I'm saying is, like in the IBM example, what were they trying to accomplish? They were trying to, they believed there was value in being able to track a product through the supply chain from start to finish. In order to do that, they needed a how. How are we going to do that? And somebody came up with the idea of a barcode. So that's my argument, is that whether it's Mark or Tracy or Keith, any of you guys who come up with what value you want to bring to the customer, at the end of the day, you got to answer, how am I going to do it? Right. And that's why I focus on the interoperability and Tracy, to your point, the MVP. Let's come up with an MVP how that can be widely adopted. That an analogy of a barcode or a QR code that our industry can start to use, that gets adopted and solves the fundamental problem of interoperability.
Okay, so we're at the top of the hour, so we're gonna wrap this. Do you want to wrap it, Tracy?
Sure. Building on what Steve was saying, I can guarantee that in any industry that has gone through this change, this evolution, there is never a perfect solution that solves the problem for everybody. Even when we were doing standardization in Lawnmark and we were trying to get multiple manufacturers to agree on a standard, it always came back down to the same thing. Let's find the one or two common things that everybody can agree on. That's what we'll standardize on. That's what we'll move forward with. And then we'll keep the other stuff open for optional adoption. And I think that what I'm hearing today, this is an approach that could work with what we're doing here and trying to move this forward.
That's what
And
we did
because it's an
with
approach that-
Haystack.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
it's an
any
approach that's
standard
actually
is-
neutral to type of building or
Right, exactly.
in fact, if it's a building at all. Okay.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, Doug? That you have the last word, and then we'll wrap.
I think it's a great start. I think it's real important because we got so many standards for interoperability that are out there, and they're all deficient. So it's about not creating just another standard that just addresses part of the solution. It really is looking at things much more holistically, big picture, cross industry, cross use case, getting to an abstraction layer that everybody can work from. And then you can get into the details specific to an industry or use case that still adhere to that top level abstract layer of interoperability. I think that's the key. That's been the shortcomings in past initiatives. You have to look at it at that higher level, which hurts the brain sometimes. But that's a lot of what that effort in thinking that through is all in that paper. So if you haven't taken a look at some of those conceptual models in there, please, I would ask everybody that listens into your webinar to take a look at that paper and look at those models. But appreciate you having me.
Thank you,
Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks,
Doug.
everybody.
Good perspective.
That's great. We'll get the video up and hope everybody has a good week, and we'll see you next week on Monday Live. Bye all.
Bye.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks. Bye.
Bye.